what could be more important than Iran's nuclear program and Israel's response to that? Well, to discuss that with me, I have the great pleasure from a different studio than the one that I normally record in, of interviewing Lieutenant Colonel Yochai Guiski. The reality of the matter is that the state of Israel has made it very, very clear and very, very apparent that it is unwilling to accept not just Iran with nuclear capabilities, but the introduction of nuclear capabilities into the Middle East writ large. We know this because history shows us in 1981, Israel, under the leadership of Menachem Begin, detonated the Osirak reactor in Iraq. And again in 2007, Israel, under the leadership of Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, detonated the Syrian nuclear reactor. Now, what's very interesting about both of those detonations, both of those operations, is that there was very little public, if any, public discourse prior to the successful military raid undertaken by the State of Israel. In fact, in 1981, as I understand it, there was simply a cable from then US ambassador to Israel informing President Ronald Reagan that the Israelis had undertaken this strike without asking permission or involving the Americans. And in 2007, there was a prelude to the strike. Ehud Olmert did visit Washington, D.C., spoke to George W. Bush. George W. Bush said he preferred a diplomatic route, particularly through the United Nations. Ehud Olmert said he didn't have any faith in that, and Israel will do what it needs to do. And only after the strike did Ehud Olmert contact George W. Bush and say something that was there is no longer there and has been destroyed completely, without being too specific. So with all of that having been said, how did we come to this place where Israel seems to want to see a military strike against Iran's nuclear capabilities, and seems also more than willing to, frankly, endlessly talk about that potentiality instead of acting with a conclusive outcome militarily?
Just to say, the difference between the Iranian program and what we looked at in Iraq and in Syria is the scope of and the complexity of the program. What you had in Iraq and in Syria, you had a plutonium-based program, which means that you had a nuclear reactor, and that reactor could have been taken out beforehand. But what you have with Iran is you have an enrichment program, which is very wide. You have capabilities that are also plutogenic because they have active reactors. They have heavy water reactors. So you have something that is far, far broader, and they have the knowledge base of a lot of people involved in this, clandestinely and openly. So this is something that is on a far, far greater scale than what we had in the issue of Iraq or Syria. But I have to mention that we also had the Libyan program, which Israel didn't know about and only knew about it after the fact, and the one that took it out was the United States. So we looked at these things and we had it. The complexity of those two, the simplicity of those two, with regards to the complexity of what happened with Iran, is a major factor. So the ability to take one strike or several strikes and take out a program of such a wide scale is something that is very different when you look at the military. And the second thing is Syria is very near, even if you look at the place that we had to go when we had to fly near Turkey and stuff. And Iraq is rather near, but Iran is now you're looking at something of in the range of 2,000 kilometers, and that makes it far more complex. So you have a program that is different. and you have operational complexity that is different and far greater than we have seen before. So these two are very complicating matters when you look at what a military can do against these programs.
So the thing about that is that Prime Minister Netanyahu, Israel's immediate past prime minister, has repeatedly said for many, many years, for more than a decade, that what is needed with regard to Iran is a combination of a biting, crippling, crashing sanctions regime coupled with a credible military threat. Now, given the complexities that you've just spoken about, and you've really only scratched the surface there, I know you of course are able to go far, far deeper than that. But given those complexities and given the lack of direct kinetic, if I can phrase it like that, or military action against Iran's nuclear capabilities, has been some kinetic activity, but not military activity, if I can classify it that way. I actually have come to the opinion that there is no credible military threat against Iran, certainly not one that the state of Israel can carry out. Am I right or am I wrong in your assessment?
I would say this is a bit more complex than looking at, because what is the strategic problem that we're looking at when we look at the issue of the Iranian nuclear program? You have to convince a nation not to pursue nuclear weapons when they have probably now the capabilities and the know-how to get there. So you have to make them, you have to affect their calculus of how they think about going and where they need to stop, because there is still a way to go between the right now, when the potential is there, they have the knowledge, they have the capabilities, they know how to enrich to a high level, but it's still a race. So the question is, what happens to them during the decision to go there? So you have to affect the decision making of the Iranian leadership, of the Iranian scientists themselves, of the Iranian of those who make the work themselves, and say, wait, we want to take that risk, we can take that risk and go that way. So you have to look at the costs that they have if they get there and during that. And the second question is whether someone is going to trip them, whether someone is going to hit them, smack them on the head and make them go back. Because, as I said, the problem is they have the capabilities, they have the know-how, they know how to do it. If they're left for their own devices, they will get there. But that's the question, and that's the issue. How do you make them understand that they will not be left to their own devices? I would say, like the Roadrunner and the Coyote, that every time the Coyote is gonna try and do something to the Roadrunner, it'll backfire. That's the thing. You have to frustrate them into understanding that this is not going to work. It'll be frustrating by costs, and will be frustrating by someone, maybe Israel, maybe someone else, denying them the ability to go forward, and every time they try to go forward, get them back. It may involve a military strike or military strikes, and it may involve other clandestine operations that we have seen nations do to Iran, and things exploding in the middle of the night with regards to nuclear installations and whatnot.
Well, another distinction about this particular ambition to reach nuclear weapons capability is just the sheer cost of a retaliation from Iran. Most notably, they're not exclusively confined to by way of their proxies. I'm referring here to Hezbollah, and I'm of course referring to Hamas, with Hezbollah being higher on the list of faithful proxies, if I can put it like that, than Hamas. We didn't face that threat when Begin decided to attack Osirak. We did not face that threat when Olmert decided to attack the Syrian nuclear reactor. But we did interview General Eli Shkedi some time ago for the US Air Force Academy on this very webinar. And he was at the time the commander of the Israeli Air Force. And he said that the preparation for a retaliation by the Syrians against Israel after he personally oversaw the detonation of that nuclear reactor was no less of a priority than preparing for the actual strike itself. Now, the reality of the matter is that Hezbollah is a more potent, more dangerous force, arguably, than anything that might come in retaliation to a strike against Syria's nuclear reactor. How ready is the state of Israel to face down the prospect of a multi-front retaliation in the event that we strike Iran's nuclear weapons program?
It's a great question. And I would say that there are different opinions on how Israel is ready. There are those that say that Israel is not ready and Hezbollah will rain death and Iranians will rain death on Israel. And from Syria, they will attack us, and from Iraq. And we will see a war that we have never seen before. There is this school of thought. Major General Brick is one of those that is saying these kinds of things very loudly and very forcefully. There are others that say we are ready. The IDF is ready. They know how to fight Lebanon. They know in Lebanon they know how to fight Hezbollah. We have probably the best ballistic missile defense capabilities in the world right now to defend the people of Israel. Yeah, war is not a cakewalk. War is not nice. There will be casualties, but if Israel needs to take an action to defend itself against something as threatening as an Iranian nuclear program that might go into a nuclear weapon, then that's a cost that we have to make, that we have to take. And the other side would face the IDF, and I don't know which one, and I certainly know, I would say, which one will face a far greater punishment in that scenario. So the question of cost is inherent into the strategic thinking about it. So will Israel go right now with COVID, with all of this thing? Are we going to go to war? We understand that war is a cost of doing something to the Iranians, and the question is, what is that something that will trigger war? Or will the Iranians and Hezbollah think and be somewhat deterred of going all in on this scenario, because they also have a lot to lose from escalating. Especially if the United States gets involved with Iran, if Iran does something to Bahrain or the UAE or to Qatar, where the U.S. forces are stationed. So the question is, what the Iranians are going to do is a complexity on its own. But I, for one, do not think that the Iranians are going to provoke the Americans. I think that will be suicidal. And Hezbollah will have to think very long and very hard. Will they go on a suicidal mission against Israel, or will they try to retaliate in a more controlled or a more specific manner? And because they have their own problems in Lebanon, we don't know. That it's a question, and there is a very big widespread scenarios that can involve. But the specter of multi-front war is definitely there, and Israel needs to take that and is taking it probably when they're planning for such an eventuality of an attack on Iran.
I might come back to Iran's proxies on the borders with the state of Israel if we have time. For now, I'd like to ask a couple of questions focusing strictly on Iran based on what you said earlier. You said you have to induce the Iranians into understanding that it's not in their interests right now to pursue a nuclear weapon, which of course implies that you will also have to convince the Iranians that it's never going to be in their interest longer term to pursue nuclear weapons. Tell us how, in your assessment, the Iranians can be convinced in the near term not to do so, and how might they be convinced in the more distant term not to do so? And tell us the number of years that you apply when using terms like near term and distant term or long term.
I don't know. It's you have to. It will be you will know it when it happens, because as I said, the Iranians have the capabilities, they have the tenacity, they have paid a very large price to stay, to develop their programs in spite of American sanctions, American pressure, Israeli actions in their vicinity, or even in Iran itself. So they have proven that they are very willing to pay the price for advancing that program. So how do you affect someone that is with that mindset? One is costs. What are the costs of going through the motion to get there? The question is, and then the costs of that's A, costs. B is the question is, will they get there? When the Iranians understand that the Israelis have a very good intelligence on what's happening in Iran, and have shown that they can reach out and touch, as I said, the Iranians or specific Iranians that are involved in the nuclear program. So the question is, if they take that decision and go forward, will someone snatch them back and yank the floor beneath them? So it's a question of how long will it take. So if that is that a cost that you're willing to take for a year, for 2 years, for 5 years, for 10 years, or maybe Iran will be willing to settle for this waiting game for that is what we call a frontier a state of that is on the verge of nuclear weapon capabilities.
Threshold capability.
Yeah, threshold state. Thank you for that. And will it be willing to stay there and not incur the costs of trying to go above and score a touchdown? This is of course not a science. It's an art. You never know. You have to deal with people. It's a question of how the current leader is thinking about it, how the next leader is going to think about it, because he may not be there forever, and how are the people that who are in charge of the economics of Iran have to deal with it, whether Iran has the economic capabilities to sustain, and what will happen to Iran if they succeed. Will it make them more secure, or will they trigger the Middle Eastern arms race that would see Iran, the Shia nation, which have the historical background of Shias that have been persecuted by Sunnis for centuries, now forcing Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey and other nations to have nuclear weapons aimed at them. I'm not. So the question is whether the Iranians will live up to those plans that we know they had or still have. That's the nuclear archive, so that they were willing to go to that distance. Will the current situation and the current understanding make them think differently? Will they want to be a pariah state? Will the Chinese have their back? Will the Russians have their back? Who's going to buy their oil in that situation? These are very tough questions, and you have to make the Iranians understand that it would be in their better interests to not go and try and find out the answers to those questions.
None of those considerations have thus far been sufficiently powerful and potent to bring the Iranians to draw back from and move away from the nuclear weapons program. Now, they may be hovering at a certain state along the development of that, but it should be mentioned that none of those deterrents have thus far been effective. Now, a couple of years ago in 2019, under the umbrella of the MirYam Institute, I hosted Mike Morell, who who was the former acting director of the CIA, in a conversation on Capitol Hill with Yaakov Perry, who is the former head of the Israeli Shin Bet, and then went on to be Minister of Science and Technology. In 2019, Yaakov Perry said he believes that Iran will acquire nuclear weapons capability within 5 years. I listened to a briefing just last week presented by Mike Morell, and Mike Morell said that he is of the opinion that the world will have to look at a nuclear-capable Iran. Now, those are the viewpoints of two experts. I happen to be in that camp, but we're here to talk about Israel's potential reaction to movements with the Iranians and their nuclear weapons program. So tell us what assets Israel has at her disposal if it comes to the point whereby she decides to move militarily against Iran's nuclear capabilities. And start, if you would, I think, with the Air Force.
I'm just going to try and rebut a little of
Please, yeah.
what you said,
Please do.
earlier. There is a school of thought that says, look, Iran has been on the verge of going nuclear for 30 years now. If you go to the intelligence assessment of the 90s, you will say that Iran is going in 5 years, in 6 years, and every time Iran is going forward, but not enough. So the question is, maybe the Iranians themselves are jittery about going full Monty on this. I don't know. But there is a school of thought that says, yeah, we know that the Iranians are persevering on this issue. But even as they persevere, they're not going as fast as they could be or could have been for the large part of 2 decades. So something is working, and if we delay, as I said, if we delay this for another 10 or 20 years, I don't know, in 20 years, when the world is like half degree hotter and oil is not a commodity that you want to buy, well, maybe the Iranians will have to think of what they're trying to do and where they're going to integrate themselves into that world. So the question of delaying something is of extreme importance when you look into the calculus of states. And Iran and affecting the calculus of Iran is the way forward. Now, as I've said, I think the Iranians have the capability, they have the know-how, and they have the perseverance. But the question is, when they are going to have the decision, when they're going to have that question, when they're going to have that, are we going for a weapon? How do we weaponize it? How do we do it? Because on the other side, there is a very, very tenacious enemy in Israel, and there is the United States that is the guarantor still of the nation states of the Middle East. And they're going to have a very, very a tough decision to make on whether and how they're going to get forward. So just saying about that. So what is Israel?
Just before you answer that, just before you move on to answer my earlier question, and this is something I so enjoy with you, Yochai, is that we from time to time disagree. My view is that were Israel in possession of the capability to militarily strike with an effective outcome, just as the Iranians have not yet made the decision to break out, I believe that the state of Israel has not made a military strike because, unfortunately, we lack the capability to do so with an effective outcome. Am I wrong? I mean, we've been talking about this for decades as well.
I would say I'm a strategy guy. The question is, you don't use force unless you get the results of using force that you want. So the question is whether using force, maybe Israel had the great capabilities in 2012, but what would have happened in 2012 by shattering the international front that was cornering the Iranians by using force at that time. So the question is not if you have the capabilities to harm someone, but what is that? If you go to Clausewitz, who said that the use of force is diplomacy and other means. I'm not sure that I'm saying it right.
Clausewitz, military forces,
statecraft in another means. So you have to think about it as statecraft. What do you want to get out of it? And the question is, so if you delay the program 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, I don't know what would be the outcome. I'm pretty sure that if it was 10 years, it would have happened by now. But what would it do? Would the Iranians now have the sympathies of the world and have their restrictions on their ability to sell oil lifted? So that's the issue. The issue is, what does the military strike serve? And as I said, Israel prefers, because the question is, how do you long-term affect the calculus of Iran? So you may have a strike that in the near terms delay it, but then shatters the ability to affect the calculus on the long term, and that will be a net loss. That will be a Pyrrhic win for Israel, and this is something that will be definitely don't want to have if you're an Israeli decision maker. So that's it. So what Israel brings to the table on this issue. So first and foremost, this is something that will be on the Air Force, and the Air Force on these issues, we're looking at F-15s that can make the trip to Iran. Israel have significant F-16s, but the question is how and are they going to make it to Iran? And the F-35 aircrafts can bring a lot of heavy firepower to those areas that need attention in Iran, because, as I said, this is a widespread program. So you have a lot of targets if you're going to strike something, or will you go on a specific target? As I said, if Israel finds out that a clandestine Iranian sneak out, what we call, is going on, and we need to take just that particular leg out of, pull that specific leg out of under the Iranians, and then it might be a narrow attack specifically on that place. It would have to take intelligence, and it would go on aerial capabilities that will probably be there by the F-15s, F-16s, and the F-35s. With probably they would have to have long-range refueling, because most of them cannot make the way back and forth. Second thing is the Israeli Air Force brings to the tables is the vast capabilities of UAVs. So you can have large-scale UAVs that can probably drop bombs, provide intel, provide cover, I don't know, maybe it can bring electronic warfare. UAVs can be a multidimensional asset that can be laid into the field, and along the UAVs, which can have long range and long time, you can use drones, which are more tactical weapon, but they can still affect what is happening in a specific region. So you can have a lot of drone swarm, or like the Iranians are attacking the UAE or Saudi Arabia with drones. This is something that could happen, and loitering munitions. Israel has the capabilities to launch weapons, and those weapons are sticking around a specific areas. Those may be used against, I would say, we haven't talked about the operational thing, but when you go into such a thing, you have to look at what you want to affect, what is the target, how are you going to get to that target, how do you deal with the things that you might come across your way and on the way to the target and try to disrupt it. So part of these things may be used against the Iranians, the Iranian forces, their ballistic missile defenses, or their capabilities to attack Israel itself. So a lot of things can work, and the question is, what is Israel trying to get out of it? Because if you think that the Iranian is going to launch missiles at Israel, you might put something in the air that will attack those capabilities as they launch or as they try to get to their launching pads. But as I said, this is going to hypotheticals on what is going to happen. Israel also have surface-to-surface missiles and rockets, which are probably more short range, so they will have to be launched from areas that are nearer to Iran. So Israel will have to go deploy them in an area that is far nearer to Iran, and then launch them from that area. But that is also a capability that is in the Israeli arsenal. Where can Israel take them that people won't know, and then launch them from there? That's a different set of questions, but that is also a relevant capabilities. There's also the Israeli Navy. I don't think it will be that relevant. The surface ships for sure, because they will mostly be a target for the Iranian retaliation. But submarines that can provide intelligence, that can maybe do something, I don't know. I'm not. But submarines can get close, and we don't know what the issue of what the targets are. So the Navy can be there too. Cyber ops is another thing that Israel is bringing to the table. Disrupting the enemy capability to defend itself, to understand what is going on, their air defenses, preoccupying them with something else, spoofing them. There are a lot of things that you can do with cyber, and Israel has shown that it has vast capabilities in that thing. I would think that if Israel is going to do something in Iran militarily, it would probably be accompanied by cyber ops. Now, another thing that Israel might do if it chooses a strike, or as an alternative to the strike, is use special operation capabilities, such
special
as
forces capabilities.
Yes. What we call both with the military and Mossad have shown that they have the Mossad has shown that they have a capabilities to operate in Iran, and the military have special ops capabilities. So if something were to happen, and this is also something that Israel might take into consideration. As I said, the question is, what is the target? How near it is? How will you get there? And so the question is, how do you use special ops in that issue? I don't know, but it is still something that Israel has and might do. Intelligence would have to be a major factor here. You have to know what the enemy is capable of, what they have, what are the targets that you want to take out, and how far is Iran along the way. So intelligence is critical to anything that's going to happen there. And last and not least, as you have mentioned, the issue, the specter of multi-front war is there. So a robust ballistic missile defense capability would probably be something that is simple. So you have to have that in order to get into an operation with on Iran, so you can defend yourself from the possible attacks that are coming your way after such an eventuality.
Well, the other thing that Israel has is now newfound partners, right? So, for example, and you've alluded to this somewhat when you talk about surface-to-surface missiles and capabilities, but whereas in the past, Iran had its proxies right on the border of southern Lebanon and the state of Israel, Israel now has not a proxy, but a partnership with a country that's very proximate indeed to Iran, and it's an open partnership and it's a public partnership. And the country I'm referring to is the UAE. What is the role of not only the UAE, but other countries, signatories to the Abraham Accords and those expected to be signatories to the Abraham Accords? What is their role as Israel weighs its options in light of Iran's continuing pursuit of nuclear weapons?
Great question. Great question. And what I'm saying here, I would speculate. The first thing is I would look further at Bahrain more than the UAE, because Iran is threatening to destroy, to annihilate and remove from the map two nation states in the Middle East. One is Israel, but the second is Bahrain. The UAE is not on the target list of destruction of Iran as a nation state, but Bahrain is. So the Bahrainis have much more to lose. Having said that, there is complicating factors here that are that I would say. Would Israel try and do something publicly and overtly from these states? That would invite retaliation. And if you look at the rules of war, a justified retaliation by the Iranians. And that would make the Bahrainis and on the Emiratis or any other nation that in that region to take damage because of something that Israel has done. And that is not something that Israel would do or take lightly when thinking about doing operations in Iran. The second thing is those nations host a lot of Americans. A great lot of Americans. Bahrain holds CENTCOM naval capabilities. The UAE have Air Force capabilities, and Qatar holds also the Air Force at El Udeid base. So the question is, it's not only our regional partners, but the Americans can take the flak of what Israel is doing. And these two things are not something that Israel, that's my opinion, would take lightly when it decides to do something. I would I think that the Israelis would look very hesitantly on trying to do something from that territory without the specific knowledge and understanding and commitment by that nation state to an Israeli operation from its territory and understanding the implications. So I would be very hesitant to see something like that they would be overtly a partner. Now they can be a passive a partner. So allowing Israeli aircraft to pass through their airspace, if that is the way that Israeli Air Force thinks that is relevant, might be a relevant thing. But as I said, so this is something I think that the Israelis will be very hesitant to do on their own. If those states, however, decide that they want to make a statement with regards to Iran, and they want to show the Iranians that they are part of an Israeli, Emirati, Israeli, Bahraini, I don't know, coalition that is dealing with them, that would be an overt coalition that is willing to act. That would be something amazing. That would be amazing.
What do you mean by that phrase, amazing? You mean find that unlikely, or do you mean that would be wonderful?
It would be amazing because it would show a level of trust between partners that is This is NATO. This is something that even NATO members often lack, and when they think about how to use force or employ it. Look at just what happens with Ukraine right now, and how NATO is thinking about using force. And if these nations are far closer to Iran and would take the brunt of Iranian retaliation, would step up and say, yes, we are part of this issue and we are willing to be part of that coalition, would be an amazing decision by these countries to be to take an overt action with regards to Iranian influence in that region with the Iranian nuclear program. And the second thing is, because of the high probability of American casualties in such an Iranian attack, retaliation, I would probably think that it would have to be with the United States at least knowing and then preparing itself for an Iranian retaliation. So there will not be it won't be a surprise, not to the Americans, not to the region. And hopefully, when you do that, it will surprise the Iranians. That makes the whole thing a lot more complicated when you have to coordinate with that many allies on an attack that would be pinpoint or with specific targets, and would not, when you wish not to have the Iranians retaliate at the maximum capabilities and draw the region into a war, but make them understand that if they go all out, that the Israelis and others have the capabilities to further escalate and further inflict a damage on the Iranians. So I would think that those partners would not be a part of a military attack or a military strike. They can provide intelligence, they can provide understanding, they can try and then use their capabilities after an attack to deter the Iranians from doing something in the region. I'm truly, if they were willing to do such a thing, I would think that would be an amazing, but I'm not sure that this would be the case.
You know, these newfound partnerships hold potential, but they're also quite fickle in some ways. People don't speak about it regularly and often. They'd rather focus on the positive for reasons that I well understand. But as an example of the fickle nature of these normalization agreements, you know, the UAE has begun to dialogue again with the Iranians. I would suggest that they are opening a dialogue again because they are coming to the realization, as the Emiratis, that it's likely that Iran is going to go nuclear. What do we read into the attempt to reestablish positive relations now by the UAE with Iran?
Another great question. But this is something that the region has known and done for decades. You can talk to enemies. Most of these are Bedouin tribes. They have traditions of how you do business. The Saudis have done business with the Iraqis, even under Saddam Hussein. So they know how to speak with enemies, to deal with enemies, and leave door open to, I'm not saying cooperation, but to a mutual beneficial relationship.
Coordination, if not cooperation.
I'm not sure that it's coordination. They know who their enemy is, but they are willing to work with them in order to prevent far worse things that are happening to them. So, as I said, if we look at the issue of Ukraine and Russia, you can understand that sometimes you have to work with someone that might just, if they wake up on the wrong side of the bed in the morning, you can find them amassing 100,000 troops on their border. So, and you have to work with them because the gas to Europe is going through Ukraine. It's not going through anywhere else. There are other gas pipes, but so the understanding of working with someone who might be your adversary is something that is understood in many, many ways. It is not something new. It is not something that is new to the region. It is not something that is new to the world. It's the way it has always been, and I would say it will always will be. But having said that, the UAE knows that the biggest threat to their national security, and the Bahraini further know, is with Iran. It is not someone else. And trying to reduce that threat by having something positive with the Iranians, I would not read into it like a bandwagoning with Iran just yet.
So there's another potentiality here, and then I'm going to come back actually to Iran's proxies along Israel's borders. The other eventuality is, and the case has been made by many people, that these normalizations that Israel enjoys with the UAE, with Bahrain, and with others, these are what are called interest-based alliances. They're not based on common ideology, common values, far from it. They're based on common interests. And the most pressing interest common to all parties is the prospect of Iran gaining a nuclear weapons capability. If Iran does gain that capability, do you see it strengthening or diluting the Abraham Accords? What's your view on that?
Wow, that is another great question that you're springing my way. I would have to say that I don't know. It a lot depends on how Iran gets there. Does it get there by being I would say mild-mannered and doing things that not provoke their neighbors, or are they doing it by still attacking their neighbors, by using the Houthis to regularly attack Saudi Arabia and the UAE? So the question is, how do you get there? Now, I'm not sure, and then how does the Iranian act, and how does the UAE and the Bahraini and the Saudis and other nations do that? I don't have an answer. It depends, a lot depends on how the US works. So do they feel that they can still be independent and work against the Iranians and push them back? How will the Chinese work the areas? Will the Chinese be a stabilizing force in the region and make the Iranians understand that even if they go nuclear, they will not allow them to disrupt the region and the flow of energy from that region to Beijing, which is over half of their energy is gotten from the Middle East. So I'm not sure how we get there. I think that what has been done right now cannot be fully reversed. You can't go back. You can't undo. You can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Those nations who have signed up to the Abraham Accord will not be able now to throw them away and say, "Oh, we didn't mean it. We weren't there." They have taken that leap of faith and have gone to the other side of that proverbial river. And the question is, then how do they protect themselves in that eventuality? I don't see them. They may dilute part of the partnerships with Israel. I think that might be on the part of the security things, but the economy will have now then a vibrancy of its own. The UAE and Israel economies are very much completing one another, and the Bahrainis. So if this will be, and say in 5 years' time, it'll be very hard to undo it. It'll be if it'll be in a year from now, and that the Iranians will have a nuclear weapon, the United States will get out of the region, and China will not be a stabilizing force. Then, if things are at the very worst scenario, then they might think that they have no other chance. But if things are not at their worst, I think it'll be a stable. The Abraham Accords will still be stable.
So Yochai, let me ask you a question. I know you're an Intel guy, and Intel guys don't necessarily deal with concrete predictions, right? They give scenarios, not predictions. But do you think, if you were to predict, do you think that we'll see a strike on a military strike on Iran's nuclear capabilities during a Biden administration, the current Biden administration?
I don't know. I'm not gonna wager in on that thing. I think it will be less. I would put it at less than 20%. I would put it this way. I think
less than 20% that we will see.
That's right.
It's interesting you say that because Mike Morell, who I referenced earlier, the former acting director of the CIA, puts it at less than 10%. Is he wrong?
Well, 10 is less than 20, but it's still.
Is he overly
I would still win. I would still
that?
win, even if he's right. I still get the winning. So I don't know. I think that there are a lot of complicating issues here. The question of what the Iranians do, what the Americans do, the political issues in Israel, because the question is, I would hate to be the prime minister that said that under my watch, Iran gained the nuclear weapon and I did nothing. This is someone that would be remembered in infamy throughout history. So there will be political considerations here as well. And Israel is known to be a nation that err on the side of action rather than inaction. So I would say it's 20%. I'd say it is double the chance that Morell said. I'm still staying with mine.
So then I just want to conclude with a couple of questions about the deterrent capabilities that Iran has at its disposal. We alluded to this a little bit earlier in the conversation. Look, you have repeated conflagrations with Hamas over in Gaza. We've had Operation Cast Lead. We've had Operation Pillar of Defense. We've had Operation Protective Edge. We've had Operation Guardian of the Walls. Who knows when the next operation is going to come? But what we do know is that even as those wars, if I can put it in those terms, against Hamas become increasingly protracted, they are yet insignificant compared to what we expect to face if Hezbollah opens up a front to our north from southern Lebanon. To put that into perspective, we anticipate about 2,200 munitions launched at the State of Israel daily, including those which can hit the most far-flung corners of the Jewish state. You mentioned the air defense capabilities. Most experts express that actually Israel's air defense is likely to be overwhelmed. The famed Iron Dome system is not capable of defending against such a bombardment from southern Lebanon. Of course, all of this comes at the command and want of Iran. Is it possible that Iran actually has the upper hand, that the ultimate purpose of Hezbollah, which is to keep Israel at bay, is it actually possible that they have out-strategized and out-thought Israel and have brought Israel to a point of not paralysis, but limited mobility and limited potency when it comes to dealing with the Iranian nuclear program? And also, if that is the case, if it's the case, and feel free to disagree, as I know you do, feel free to do, should not Israel be considering a preemptive strike on Hezbollah in southern Lebanon? We're operating, after all over the place, over the skies of Syria. We're interdicting and impeding the land bridge that the Iranians seek to build and to establish. Shouldn't we really now be looking at a preemptive strike against Hezbollah, defang them, and then we'll have free rein to deal with the head of the snake, namely Iran itself?
Another great question and great scenario. So the question is, what do you deal with first? And the thing is, I would say, if someone thinks about dealing with Hezbollah first and then dealing with Iran, it would probably, dealing with Hezbollah would be a full-fledged war. It doesn't matter if it starts with Iran or starts with a preemptive attack. The question is, what would a preemptive attack on Hezbollah? What is the delta? What would it provide Israel when it goes to war, and what would it do to, as I said, military effects strategy? What would it do to Israel's capabilities to live up to its targets, to its goals, to its political goals, international goals? Going up against Lebanon unprovoked on a preemptive strike would probably bring about a very, very nasty reactions from the Russians, from the US. Lebanon is already under a humanitarian catastrophe right now because of COVID, and because of corruption, and because of what happened at the harbor. So going after the Hezbollah on our own would not be conducive, and then we will have to replenish ourselves after that war, and then go after Iran. So instead of trying to deal with the problem right now when it is still probably manageable, it will take 2 or 3 years after such a war with Hezbollah. So if we're trying to go first to war with Hezbollah and then deal with Iran, then you are buying Iran a few years of trying to get of doing what they want with the nuclear program when Israel is licking its wounds. So that's one. So if you're sequencing it like that, so the preferred sequence, I would guess, is go after the Iranian program, take it out as long as you can, make it, and then suffer what Hezbollah can do to you, and take them out, and that will be the war that you will have to face. Take out the Iranians, and they'll deal and prepare yourself to dealing with Hezbollah and Hezbollah's retaliation. I would really not want to be on the side of the Lebanese when the Air Force and the Israeli armor is going through there. Since Hezbollah has taken very careful consideration of detaching itself from the citizens, which is it has embedded itself with the citizens. So Hezbollah will bring upon fire into the villages, the built-up areas of Lebanon. It would be destruction that has on another scale that Lebanon has yet to see. And I think no one in Israel thinks or wants to go into that thing. It would be very devastating. Now, Israel undoubtedly will suffer from such a war, as you have mentioned. But the question is, there was one guy that I really appreciate. He was my commanding officer. He said, the question is with the war is whether you can get out of the bunker after everything that they've thrown at you, do like that, take the dust off, and go back to work and go back to things. So the question is, will they be able to put a lot of dust on Israel, hurt buildings or stuff like that, or will they be able to cripple Israel? Will they be able to do things that would damage Israel considerably? I would just say, in Israel's best war, the 6-day war, we had about 1,000 casualties, dead soldiers. So I would say that even if the costs of taking out the Iranian nuclear program for a couple of years, for a significant time, and they will be far, far less than 1,000 dead Israelis under any estimate, because Israel has prepared itself for that eventuality. We know what to do when they attack, and I think that those numbers, we will not see anything close to those numbers that we have seen in the past. So the question is, are the decision makers willing to take those chances and see that scenarios brought about? I am not envious of anyone that would have to deal with such a thing. With the question is, how long will a military strike take back the Iranian program? What would it do to our regional allies? What would it do to our international allies? What would it bring to the capabilities to withholding Iran on a long-term basis from acquiring nuclear capabilities? And then how do we transition to a regional war, to a war with probably with Hezbollah after an attack on Iran? That is the scenario of an attack on Iran. That is why it is difficult. But the Jewish state was not made because of easy decisions. It is based on difficult decisions and strong leadership that tries to avert disaster and whatever it can. And as I said, Israel is known to be to be wrong on the side of action than to be wrong on the side of inaction.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.